Hey guys, if you want to know what's going on in the outdoor industry, from the outdoor recreation space to adventure travel to fly fishing to all things in between, and Mandela and I are going to talk about how I got into the outdoor space from the time I was, a little infant, and then how I got into the outdoor business side of the world, and now the podcast, and how I weave all those things together to help you determine if that might be the path you want to take.
Hi folks, my name is Chris and I'm the artist and co-founder at Explorer Maps. My brother Greg and I produced our first map about 11 years ago, doing the map of Montana, and our list of maps has grown from 1 to our current tally of over 65.
Which map will you get to help you treasure your own special times? Please be sure to use the promo code Mandela for a discount when you visit explorermaps.com.
Welcome to The Trail Less Traveled, an adventure radio series and podcast dedicated to collecting stories and sounds from around the world in order to take you back to mankind's earliest form of entertainment, storytelling. This episode was recorded on location in collaboration with Explorer Maps. Missoula, Montana is a mecca for outdoor enthusiasts, and each week we will bring you tales of adventure from both near and far, as well as information and inspiration and a few tunes to set the mood. You can subscribe to the podcast and learn about our international outreach projects at traillesstraveled.net. And now, here's your host, international expedition guide, conservationist, and yogi, Mandela.
We are sitting here deep within the forests of Northern Vermont. It's the peak season for foliage, changing colors. 360 degrees around me, it's a polychromatic array of leaves. We're talking bright yellow to green, purple, orange, red. It's quite a magical place to sit. Right below us, on a slope covered in fern, there is a mountain creek, and it's a really peaceful spot to sit. I'm sitting here with Rick Saez. Rick is the host of the Outdoor Biz podcast, where he shares the stories and advice from all the great people who make up the outdoor recreation industry. Rick himself is a longtime outdoor aficionado and veteran. He has worked as a guide in the Sierras, as well as 6 years on the Kern. He's also a teacher and did backpacking education with 6th graders. Very experienced, and I am very honored not only to be sitting with Rick today in the forest to document his story and share it with you. Rick, thank you so much for your time and your energy joining me here in the forest today for The Trail Less Traveled.
Well, thank you. It's always fun to talk podcasting and talk outdoors and be outdoors. I've been an outdoor lover since I was a kid. My grandfather turned me on to it, and just having the ability to work in the industry and meet people like you who are sharing it in a variety of ways, specifically podcasts. Love to do all I can to pass it on.
My first question for you is, where did you grow up, and how was adventure a part of your childhood?
Well, I grew up in Southern California. I was born in San Bernardino, lived as a really young child in Colton, and then eventually found my way, and the family found the way to Fontana, California, where I, started first grade all through high school and whatnot. And some of the first memories I have, and some of the memories, family stories that get told, are always of Rick. Whenever you would pick Rick up, he would start crying, and he would always say, side, side, side. And my mom says I was only happy when she put me down and let me go outside. So I don't remember that, obviously, but that's what the story goes. And I guess I've been an outside kid and let me alone and let me play outdoors since I was born. And growing up, our family was very active. I was into a lot of sports. I played baseball, football, basketball. We rode bikes around the neighborhood. And my grandfather was a pretty active outdoorsman. He fished and hunted and did a lot of hiking. He's the one who really, I think, solidified my love for the outdoors, because I'd go deer hunting with him, fishing with him. As a young kid, we had a trailer, so we'd go on these long trips with the trailer, camping, and sometimes Pop would go along with us, and we'd go on hikes and all that stuff. And then my family eventually, we all got into it and fished and stuff. So the outdoor life has been in my life since day one, I would say, and it just has continued on. I was fortunate enough I tell the story, my dad and grandfather worked at a steel mill, And I remember one time that in the small town that we grew up in, everybody graduated high school and went to work for the steel mill. So my dad and father took me out and got me a tour of the mill, and it was a hot, windy day, and just, it was like, man, this is horrible. It stunk, it was hot, there was dust everywhere. And we got home at dinner that night, and they were all, making the pitch, okay, we can get you a good summer job, and then you'll get a good job with benefits and have a great job the rest of your life. And I looked at them both and I said, man, there's not enough money in the world that would make me work in a steel mill like the one we were in today. And eventually went to college. I was going to study architecture and engineering, and got to college. And I was one of those lucky kids who didn't have to study to get good grades in elementary school, and got to college in high school. Got to college and didn't know how to study, so I flunked out. And I went to a junior college to get my grades up, and I took an environmental biology course and a wildlife law enforcement course, and that just really solidified the outdoor continuation for me, because I realized I could get a degree in the outdoors. And the environmental biology course, the guy had some slides. It was just when they were starting to drown Glen Canyon Dam, and he had a slideshow of what that canyon looked like before the water. And that just right there sealed the deal. I knew that I was going to continue to go back to school, get my outdoor degree. I went back to school, made the dean's list, was president of the Student Recreation Society, got sort of recruited to go to BYU to get my master's degree, and it's all been outdoor since then. I've never gone off the path. I worked at an outdoor retail shop, got a job as a sales rep in the outdoor space. It's just been all outdoors all the time. Wouldn't change it for the world.
Rick, tell us a little bit more about your parents and what they were interested in, and some of your earliest memories of specific times going out and exploring with them.
My parents were mostly into taking the trailer out camping, whether it was on weekends or we do long trips. My dad, one of the perks that came with the steel mill job was if you worked so many months there, or years, I don't know which it was, you got a 13-week vacation. So I remember we started off on this 13-week vacation. I didn't go on the whole trip. We ended up going to Yellowstone and just, seeing the wonder of Yellowstone and hiking and camping around there. But it was a lot of weekend trips with the trailer. And then, like I said, with my grandfather, it was a lot of just any kind of adventures, whether it was I went deer hunting with him, I went bird hunting with him, fishing with him. He eventually moved from Fontana when he retired to Bishop, California, where I live today. And up there is just a mecca of outdoor activities. And I learned how to drive up there and learned how to do a lot of hunting and fishing up there with him. So it's just a lot of hiking, camping, walking, anything we could do outdoors. Did a lot of fishing, a lot of things.
For someone listening that's maybe more of the international audience, could you take us back and maybe paint the picture of what it was like in terms of in the forest and in the mountains where you grew up and where you spent your childhood?
Yeah, I think the thing for me that I remember, just to contrast it against today, was there was always, you'd go there and there was never anybody there. And Fontana is about 75, 80 miles east of Los Angeles. So it's an urban area. Back then, it wasn't nearly as populated as it is today. But the thing about the world back then was there just weren't as many of us. So when you would go to a campground, you didn't need a reservation. You just drove up. You got a campsite. When you went on the trail, you rarely saw anybody. And when you went fishing, you would go fishing in these lakes that had, hundreds, thousands, millions of fish in them. You always caught fish. You always caught a limit. I remember the funny thing back then was the limit was 10, and we'd go catch 10 fish a day between the four of us and have 40 fish and put them in the ice chest, and we'd eat fish. We'd freeze them and eat fish all year round. So wasn't fresh trout, but it was freshly caught trout, always. And so that was the thing. There just wasn't the areas weren't as crowded. They were all every bit as beautiful, every bit as, enticing and adventurous and begging you to go around the next corner of the trail or go to the next pass, go to the next hike. I remember when I graduated high school, a bunch of buddies and I wanted to do the Pacific Crest Trail, but we didn't have time. So we hiked from Tahoe to Yosemite. It was about 15 days. And we did a little test run for a week long in the Sierra, and we caught a ton of fish, had a great time. So we thought, well, next year when we do the real trip, we probably don't need to bring as much food because we'll catch fish and it'll just be a grand time. And we started off, we didn't catch any fish, but we had a lot of potato flakes and stuff to eat, so we just didn't have fish. We caught fish, but not as many as we did the first trip. But again, nobody on the trails. It was just a beautiful hike, and I've mainly spent my outdoor life in the Sierra. I've done a lot of trips around the world, but I haven't hiked like in the Appalachians, for example, or much in Colorado. So a lot of my early years were formed in the Sierra, and it's just a great, if you haven't been to the Sierra, you got to come and check it out. It's beautiful from, Yosemite and Sequoia in the south to the north up in the Cascades in Washington. That's out of the Sierra, but that whole Pacific Crest Trail range and along the Sierra Nevada and all those mountains are just beautiful.
Rick, I would love it if you could reflect on this concept that, you want adventure, you want to get outside, but you don't necessarily have to go international to do that. It sounds like you really embraced and explored your own backyard.
Yeah, I did a lot. I mean, growing up in Fontana, we had mountains just to the north of us, the San Bernardino Mountains, where San Gorgonio Peak was the tallest peak in the range. And we had Mount Baldy. We hiked up to the top of all those. There were ski areas there where when it snowed back then, we could go skiing. So all the outdoor activities that you could participate in, I didn't climb at the time, but we would go backpacking, hiking, fishing, skiing, just exploring, riding our bikes. My grandfather used to call it monkeying around. We'd just go into the mountains and see what we found, and it was swimming holes, just so much fun. And having that in your backyard, I think, and getting to do it frequently really seals the deal. It just cements it in your DNA, and you want to do it the rest of your life. And I think you can find adventure wherever you live. You just may have to look a little harder, but there's a lot of great cities and towns that have great parks that you can go and explore, state parks, national parks, local city parks. It's just get outside. Whatever it is you want to do, just get outside. I think being outside is the trick.
Rick, what's one of your favorite things about getting outside, specifically in California?
I think for me, it's a combination of being outside. There's something, like I said, it was ingrained in me when I was a little kid. I just always wanted to be outside. So I still, to this day, always feel more comfortable outside. When I, with my podcast, a lot of times I spend, the weekend behind the mic and then behind the editing screen, and I get a little antsy. And it's just good to go out for a walk, even if it's for a walk behind the canal, just get outside. And I think each of us have our own place where we feel naturally comfortable, whether it's outside. Some people like it in the water. For me, it's just being outside. Just whatever outside means, going for a walk around the neighborhood. Where I live, there's a bunch of trails and old dirt roads and things. I can just go for a walk down there for 2 hours to come home, and I'm good. I just, solved all the problems of my world that day. I can go back to work or back to doing whatever. Just be outside.
Rick, I would love to talk to you about your podcast, the Outdoor Biz podcast, how you were inspired to do it, how people can find the show, and what you like to talk about.
Well, I kind of stumbled into the whole podcasting world. I was working for Lowepro camera bags at the time. I was living in Alameda, California, in the Bay Area, and I had a 1 hour, one-way commute to work every morning and every evening. And, you can only listen to so much music and so much radio. And I stumbled I'd always been familiar with podcasts, but I never really test drove them or tried them out. And on that commute, I was listening to books on tape. And again, you can only do so much of that. So I started listening to podcasts. And some of the early podcasts I listened to were, I think some of the popular podcasts at the time and still to this day. Pat Flynn has a great podcast. Tim Ferriss has a great podcast. There were some other, I think NPR didn't have the assortment that they have today, but they had some great podcasts. And they just help you pass the time. And I think the other thing for me about podcasting is I always learn something, whether I learn something about the host or the guest or whatever. And then eventually I got laid off from Lowepro. They were having some tough times. And in the course of the layoff, I knew that was coming. And I had been sort of searching for my next move in the outdoor space and wasn't getting a lot of attention. And I was north of 50 years old at that point in time and had a long career and was making really good money. So A, I was expensive, and B, I was probably on the backside of my career instead of the front side of my career. And I thought, I may not work again. So some of these guys are making money with podcasts. I could do a podcast. And the one I listened to the most was probably the Tim Ferriss show. And he was just interviewing all the people he knew from his life, whether it was Silicon Valley, some of his exploits there, some of his business things. And I thought, with the outdoor industry, I have an unlimited supply of people to talk to. And it not only would be good podcast material, but I think it would also be great to share the stories of all these people and how they got into the outdoor industry and how they got into the outdoors, because they've given and done so much for me and so much for all of us in the outdoor industry. So it'd be good to give back to them a little bit and share their stories. And so that's what I did. I, did some research on how to do a podcast, started out with very minimal equipment, interviewed some of my really close friends. Somewhere I read that if you're going to get into podcasting, don't spend a bunch of money, just try it out first to see if you like it. And I did 3 episodes, put them up on Libsyn and published them, and I enjoyed the conversations, and the feedback I got was fantastic. And I thought, well, okay, maybe you got something here. And I kept going, and here we are. I'm about to record I've recorded episode 300. It's about to publish sometime in November. So jump in, do it. It's very inspiring. It's very fun. You can podcast about whatever you want. Guarantee you there's 1,000 people out there that'll listen to it.
You and I are here at the Outdoor Writers Association of America annual meeting in Jay Peak, Vermont. And you are a presenter. And so for 2 days in a row, you gave a workshop about podcasting. And so I was wondering, maybe someone is out there listening and they've been thinking about doing it for a while as well. You are a professional coach in this realm as well. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give us a couple of steps?
Yeah. I break it down into 6 to 5 steps, really. And the first one is to really figure out what it is you're passionate and inspirational about that you can talk about for a long time. Because whether it's going to be a long time in a podcast episode or a long time as in multiple episodes, you want to have some material there to work with. And for me, it was an obvious one, the outdoors. I knew a bunch of people, and I'd been in the outdoor industry for a long time, so it was kind of a natural. But do a lot of homework and study that and figure out what it is you want to talk about. And then module 2 is just figure out how you're going to do that. Do you want to do an interview show? Do you want to do a news show? Do you want to do, just you on there talking about the things that you love, cooking, whatever it might be? Figure out what that is. That way you can be sure to stay focused, and then figure out who your ideal listener is, because you're always talking to that listener. And it's funny, I tell everybody to write down their ideal listener to the kind of shoes and what kind of dog they have, because you want to know every little thing about that person. Because still to this day, I'll be in the middle of an interview and for some reason, your mind goes blank, and I'm able to just visualize that ideal listener, and it comes right back to me, and I just know the next question to ask, or it triggers a question to ask. So you want to do that, and then do a little bit of research on podcasting itself. It's not that tough. It's recording audio. We're recording today on an iPhone. You can record on an iPhone. I think the first 5 or 10 episodes of my show were done with my earbuds and Skype. And I was on my phone on Skype, and the guest was either online or on Skype. So you don't need a lot of equipment, and don't spend a lot of money on equipment, because you might not enjoy podcasting. Just test it out, test drive it, get some minimal equipment, start recording. And then when you get the recording done, you have to do all the editing. Don't freak out about that. It's not that hard. There's Adobe Audition. There's other things that you can download. GarageBand is a free one that you can use to edit it, and there's places to publish it and post it, and publish it and post it, and then you got to tell the world about it. So you want to be sure that you either have a website or a place to send them to. There are people that host podcasts that give you a place to send them to, or that push your podcast out to all the places: Apple, Spotify, Pandora. I use Libsyn, Libsyn. I think they're really terrific, but there's all kinds that you can use. And once you get all the audio recorded, edited, and created in the show, and you get it published on your host, publish it out there, start telling people about it. You want to use the social media platforms to do that, but you also want to do it yourself. And if you can, do a simple website so people can go, because sometimes the internet might be down, or Google might be down, or Facebook might be down, and they can't find you there. So if you have a website, they can always find you there. But just take some time. You can go to various places. You can go to my website, ricksaez.com, and there's a button called Learn, and I have some coaching and resources that you can download. But just do a little research, figure out what you like, figure out who you're talking to, and do it. Go for it. It's super fun, and everybody's got a story to tell. We all do.
Aho. Rick, you are an outdoor industry aficionado. You've worked from being a guide to being an outdoor educator to being in sales, communications. I would love to dive into the outdoor industry.
Man, that's a big one. I don't know if we have enough time.
Yeah, probably not.
The outdoor industry is, my outdoor world anyway, is really a little broader than just the outdoor recreation industry, because I've been fortunate to dabble in adventure travel and fly fishing. I worked for Umpqua Feather Merchants for a bit. I was with Eagle Creek for 10 years, so we were in the outdoor industry, but we were also in the adventure travel industry, the travel industry, the luggage industry, so got a lot of exposure there. And in my early days, I was a sales guy. I was pretty much came out of my guiding world as a sales guy. It's a funny story. I was working as a river guide and on the Kern River, and a couple buddies and I decided to open up a little retail shop. And one guy was a really great mountain biker. Another guy was a good business person and rafting guide. I did a little bit of climbing at the time, and I had a retail experience. So we opened up this cool little shop. We found the storefront there in downtown Kernville, right on the bridge, and we got everything, the mountain biking guy, John Stallone, he still owns the shop to this day, Mountain River Adventures, if you're ever in Kernville. Shout out to you, John. Good job for keeping it alive all these years. But he was a great craftsman too, so he made us some beautiful wood cases and glass for our retail stuff. And then we got to looking around and said, well, we need some stuff. And they all looked at me and said, well, you worked at A16, you worked retail, why don't you go to the outdoor show and buy us some stuff? So I made plans to go up to Outdoor Retailer, which was in Reno at the time. I went up there, and through friends of friends, met the group of guys that were bringing Montbell into the U.S. at the time. Montbell is a Japanese outdoor brand. They're mostly a retailer, but they manufacture their own backpacks, apparel, all kinds of stuff. Met them, and long story short, they hired me as their California rep. And so I had to go back to Kernville and tell the guys, hey, I got a real job, sort of. It's a rep job, and outdoor was still new at the time, but I didn't find anything at the show for us to sell. I think you guys have enough, stuff here to work from Mike's previous days. And left and went to become a sales rep. And I was a sales rep for a couple years with Montbell, traveling up and down, selling Montbell to retailers from Fifth Season up in Shasta to Summit Hut down in Tucson, Arizona. Started out driving a motorhome, but the motorhome that they provided kept breaking down, so we got out of that plan. And it didn't work out because the motorhome was so big I had to park it around the corner, and the retailers back then, the one guy ran the shop and was the buyer and so he didn't have time to come out to the motorhome. So I would have to haul all the line into the shop, which was, fleece jackets when it was 100 degrees outside. So I'm hauling everything in and out, but it was super fun. We got Montbell off the ground. They still have some retail shops across the country today. But from there, I went into join Eagle Creek. I was a sales guy at Eagle Creek for about 10 years. And at Eagle Creek, the environment there was the sales team had a lot of input on product. So that's where I really got to give some direct input on the design and build of product. And then from Eagle Creek, I went to Dana Design and worked as sort of the GM there for a bit, couple years. They had just got purchased by K2, and we had a small team on Vashon Island, and we were still making the great backpacks that Dana made at the time, super bomber packs, some of the best packs I think ever made. And left there and ended up, not sure what I ended up doing there, but somehow ended up in the product design world. And I worked for Lopro as a product manager. I worked for Jansport as a product manager. And that's where I really got to see the back end of how stuff is made. I got to meet with the suppliers. I got to meet with the fabric guys, the coatings guys. We'd go to Asia a couple times a year to work with the factories. And there's really a lot of research, design, and development that goes into every piece of gear that's made in the outdoor. And there's a lot of smart people behind that. And not only are they smart from terms of, how retail works and pricing and product margins, but they're also smart from the production side. Some of the production folks over in Asia are just wicked smart. And then we do a lot of research with consumers and with retail buyers and shop owners about what it is they need to, what are they missing on their shelf? There's a wall of backpacks. Which backpack do you not have? So there's a lot of energy and effort though that goes into making each and every product, and we all make it with the end user in mind, right? We want to make the best product to do whatever that function is that they're going to do with it, whether it's a camera bag with Lopro, it's got to carry all your camera equipment, to a day pack with Jansport. Back in the day when we were doing day packs, the kids used to use their day packs as bowling balls and slide them down the sidewalks and knock over their lunch pails, so they had to be made to withstand all that day-to-day activity. So there's a lot of energy and effort that goes into that. There's a lot of great products and great brands out there. So continue to support your outdoor retailer and your outdoor brand, and they won't let you down, I promise you.
It's really wonderful to hear your story, Rick, about being a local small business in Kernville, because this radio show is sponsored by a local small business in Missoula, Montana called The Trailhead.
I know The Trailhead very well.
The Trailhead.
Been there, yeah. Hey guys, how you doing?
So The Trailhead have been sponsors of the trail that's traveled for a long time. What advice do you have for someone who's heading into the trailhead and they're looking for good outdoor gear? What are some of the things that you look for? Everything in there is good, but to make it unique to that person, what's something that they might want to just consider?
Yeah. I would lean on the staff. I mean, I would, do some homework. And these days, you can find out all you want to find out about the products online. Everybody's got websites, from retailers to brands to, people that have an opinion about this stuff. So do as much research as you want online and kind of narrow things down maybe. But once you get into that shop, I would just engage with the staff, because the thing about the staff that a lot of folks might not realize is not only is the staff like you in that they're doing a lot of research themselves and they have opinions themselves, but they're also getting training and expertise passed on to them from the sales reps and from the sales managers. One of the things that I would do as a sales guy at Eagle Creek was travel all around to these retailers and work with the sales rep and conduct clinics, adventure travel clinics, to talk about not only the gear, but we talk about what type of trip you were going to go on and what best piece of gear was designed for that kind of trip. If you're going to, wheel around through Paris, it's kind of an adventure trip, but you may not need a pack. Whereas you're going to go trekking in the Himalayas, that's a different piece of gear that you need. So really use that staff. They're experts. They do it every day. They hear the questions from consumers every day. They get the training from the reps every day. And they're more of a gear junkie than you are, believe it or not. They just love the gear. That's why they work there.
Awesome.
And the guys at the Trailhead do a pretty good job at it. You guys are really super. Been there a long time.
Hi folks, my name is Chris and I'm the artist and co-founder at Explorer Maps. My brother Greg and I produced our first map about 11 years ago, doing the map of Montana, and our list of maps has grown from 1 to our current tally of over 65. I've been drawing and painting for a long time, starting as an advertising illustrator in the 80s back in Canada, to exhibiting wildlife and landscape oil paintings in East Africa through the 1990s. But I find that what I'm doing now with Explorer is the most rewarding project I've ever been involved with, mostly because it's a family business, and helping to grow that business gives me a real sense of purpose. We've even got our daughter Becca in on the action, making short documentaries and videos. She's just done one of Costa Rica. And my wife Ness will be finding new markets for our Explorer products when we move back to Kenya in the summer. So that'll be great fun. On the topic of connecting people in place, hopefully these maps bring back memories of great holidays and fun with family and friends. And it makes people want to get out there and connect or reconnect with these places. Do I have a favorite map? I definitely do not have a favorite map. They're all my favorites because they're like my children. I love them all equally. How's that for a diplomatic answer? Anyway, thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Vanessa, Chris's wife. Which map will you get to help you treasure your own special times? Please be sure to use the promo code Mandela for a discount when you visit explorermaps.com.
One of my intentions is to paint the picture for the listener so that they can join us here today in the forest. So I was wondering if you might be willing to look around 360 degrees and tell us what you're looking at. Where are you sitting today?
Boy, we're in a beautiful spot right now. It's fall here in Vermont this time of year, and we are fortunate to be here at peak color. So the photographer in me can't wait to get my camera out later today or maybe tomorrow and just get pictures of this beautiful yellows and reds and oranges and some of the dark greens. There's a stream below us, so I can slow down the shutter and get the rushing stream. The forest floor is filled with fallen leaves and branches, and it's damp and spongy and soft, and I'm probably wrecking my pants. I'm going to have to change pants before we go to dinner tonight, sitting on this mossy rock. But it's just a fantastic outdoor setting for recording a podcast, sitting and reading a book, or just sitting here and contemplating life. It's beautiful. Wish you were here.
So Rick, you and I have a lot in common, and one of the things that we have in common is that we have a background in guiding. In the beginning of my guiding career, I was using my mother's hand-me-down outdoor gear. So my mother was born in 1941. And she was a supporter of LL Bean right back in the 60s when they just started making poofy jackets and backpacks. And so I got all of her hand-me-down gear. And I'll tell you that the poofy jacket I started guiding in wasn't that warm, but, it was covered in duct tape with real goose down in it. I'd seen pictures of my mother backpacking all over the world wearing that jacket. So it was quite an honor for me to wear it. I was wondering if you could talk to us about the evolution of outdoor gear, getting started in the 60s and maybe what people were using before that and some of the early explorers and, how did we come to have this breathable Gore-Tex,
Well, I think as with anything, I don't go back that far. I'm 60 years old, so anything before 1960 I really don't know about, but I did, get some hand-me-down gear. But it's really like anything else. I mean, I think everybody's always trying to build a better mousetrap, whether you're trying to make your podcast better, trying to make your campsite better. Those of us that build things, we're always trying to do it better. And I remember when I was a kid, when I first started going backpacking, I remember the first cross-country ski trip I went on. We went to the Army surplus store back there. It was where you got your gear. There were a handful of shops. I think there was one shop in San Bernardino Ski and Sport, that had some new, early product from Kelty and other people like that. But we went to the Army surplus store, and I had these wool Army insulated pants that were heavy as hell and big heavy jackets. And I was even, some of you that are in my age range, you'll remember the Frostline kits where you could order a kit and make your own jacket, where they would send you this new, the current age of nylon and these little pouches with down in them and needle and thread and patterns. And I made my first down jacket and I made my first parka probably, so that was pretty exciting. I don't think that exists anymore, but it's just a combination of inspiration and trying to make things better. And then as the world evolves, we all know, whether it's the phones we're talking on today or the cars we're driving today, they just get better. They just find new ways and better ways to do things, whether it's better and faster or better and lighter or whatever it might be. So those of us in the product world and the outdoor space are continuing with that ethos of trying to find design, functionality and lightweightness in materials. And today, it's phenomenal, some of the materials and things that are available to work with. I mean, the packs that are out there today weigh a fraction of what they would, just the pack before you put the stuff in it when I was, starting out. And the footwear, too, is pretty remarkable, too. I remember I have bad knees, so I'm always trying to get really, soft shoes with great spongy liners. Too many years of playground activity and football probably, and maybe too many hikes, but I'm always trying to, protect my knees. And this footwear these days, it looks like it would not be that stable and protect your foot because it's so light, but then that's the technology of the fabrics. And then you get on the trail and it's just fantastic. It feels like you're walking on, pillows. So trying to make things better, build a better mousetrap, build better functionality into it, build better quality into it. And kids come up behind all of us and learn from us and design new things and make it better and better and better. That's the beauty of it. It always gets better. And the outdoor space is, I think, particularly known for continuing better product. And it creates challenges for our storage units and our wallets, but, we love it. We got to keep buying it and keep using it because it helps us in so many ways.
Rick, will you tell us a little bit about the Kern River?
The Kern, I haven't guided that many rivers. I've been on a handful of rivers. I was fortunate enough to go to the Tachincini and lead a group up there. I was with some Sobrek friends who were doing a fam trip on the Karnali River in Nepal. So I've been on some big rivers. Tachincini was fantastic and beautiful. The Karnali was great, but the week we were there, it rained every day, monsoon rain, so the water came up. It was scary. I mean, every boat but mine flipped. I think 2 of our boats were torn, got ripped, so we had pretty much an epic trip on that trip. There was some partying done when we got off of that trip. But the Kern is a really fun spot in Southern California. It's, fed from the Sierra Nevada mountains, which has been my playground my entire life. So you know where the water's coming from. And depending on the snow melt and the snow year and all that is depending on how wild the river gets. But there's some terrific Class 5 stuff up on the forks of the Kern, which I've run a couple times. I'm guided mostly on the upper Kern, not the forks, but the upper Kern right above Kernville, which is probably has more technical rapids than the lower, depending on the water level. The lower has the big 5 The lower river you put in right below the dam, and the 5 rapids that you run before you take out are the big rapids there. And they can get pretty technical at high water, and a couple of them at low water. There was one rapid there, I forget the name of it, where if you dropped in this chute at a certain water level and you sat in the back of the boat, on the very back end of the boat, and just waited at the right time, it would just launch you over the front of the boat. The front dropped so fast and the back rose up so fast that it shot you over the front of the boat. And that always was a crowd pleaser. The crowd would just go nuts, They would look at you flying through the air. So the Kern is just a fun river. At most water levels, it was very playful. You could do a lot of surfing in waves, and you could take people on these little side chutes through the overhanging rocks and things, kind of like the Jungle Cruise stuff. It just had everything. And different times of year, it was different too. The early season, when the water was raging, it was kind of scary and dangerous. And then at the end of the season, as you're just trying to ink out every last trip over 3 inches of water, it was kind of challenging to find the right path. But super fun, super enjoyable. It was 2 days, so one night, one overnight. So you didn't have to, it wasn't this big expedition kind of thing. That's a different kind of fun. But just a great river to learn on and a great river to make a living on for a few years.
Rick, for someone who's listening who also loves being outside and heard your interview, and maybe they're not necessarily interested in going down the path of podcasting, but they love the fact that you have worked in almost every aspect of the outdoor industry, what advice would you have for them?
I would say follow your passion. The beauty of the outdoor industry today is, when I got started, it was a lot of outdoor people did the jobs. It wasn't that sophisticated. We didn't have all the number crunching and social media things back then. So really today, I think there's opportunity for everybody. I would say first that you want to be passionate about the outdoor industry, the outdoors, because that's the common thread. But if you love sales, go into sales. If you're kind of a tinkerer or a designer, go into designer. But even if you're a really technical wizard at analytics or some back-end computer thing that I don't even know exists, we need you. Brands need you, retailers need you, because it's all those analytics that drive the bus these days, and we have to know which buttons to push to sell more, to design better, or to sell less sometimes. Sometimes we need to sell less. Maybe we have too much stuff that we're making. So whatever it is you love, there's probably a job for you in the outdoor industry. I would recommend you work retail. I think retail is where the rubber meets the road. The outdoor industry is very customer-driven, and consumer-driven. So if you have that retail experience, you know what the consumer is like, you know what retail's like on the floor, because that's where it all gets handled. Do that. That'll put you in a good place to get a job. But even if you're not, just go, turn in your resume, be willing to start at the bottom. Even if you've been an outdoor guide and a super wizard in the outdoors, you're not going to start as the director of sales. You got to work your way up. Be willing to do that. Go, get involved somewhere with a brand or a retailer and jump in with both feet. Be willing to stick with it, and next thing you know, you'll have a 30-year career.
I love it. I feel like that advice can also be translated over to guiding.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I wanted to say thank you so much for your time and energy joining me here today on The Trail Less Traveled.
Thank you. This has been super fun. I'm glad to meet you and get to spend some time with you at this event we're at. It was great fun with the podcast workshops too. There's a lot of exciting podcasts coming your way, guys, and exciting podcasts that exist. So thanks for listening. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Rick Saez is the host of the Outdoor Biz podcast, where he shares the stories and advice from all the great people who make up the outdoor recreation industry. Rick, in the radio world, we call what you have audible chocolate, right? So not everybody has a voice like you. But maybe in your best podcast voice, could you tell us about how to find the Outdoor Biz podcast?
Yeah, you can find the Outdoor Biz podcast at the Outdoor Biz podcast and all the podcast apps, wherever you get your podcast. You can go to my website, ricksaez.com. There are 3 links. The first one is listen. If you click the listen link, that'll take you right to the listen page. There's a player there with the latest episode. I'm all over the social medias. You can find me at Rick Saez on the socials. Also, the Outdoor Biz podcast on LinkedIn and Facebook, and Outdoor Biz Pod on Instagram. I'm all over the place. Love to have you as a listener. Give me some feedback. Maybe you can come on the show someday. 3 bits of advice. I would say always follow your heart, always follow your passion, and always have fun. Because whatever you do, and even if we were sitting out here and the snow was blowing and it was 20 degrees, we would still be having fun because we're outside.
Namaste Missoula, Mandela here, your host of The Trail Less Traveled, the community's source for adventure and conservation information and inspiration. The show premieres every Sunday night at 6 Mountain Time, streaming live online at trail1033.com. If you missed the premiere, you can find the Trail Less Traveled podcast everywhere podcasts are found. The Trail Less Traveled is dedicated to collecting stories and sounds from the most remote locations around the world in order to bring you, the listener, back to mankind's earliest form of entertainment, storytelling. We are incredibly excited to be collaborating with Explorer Maps, a small family business based in Missoula, Montana. Explorer Maps and the Trail Less Traveled are working together to bring cartography alive through storytelling, conservation, culture, history, and art. Learn more by visiting exploremaps.com. That's it for this week's adventure, my friends in Missoula and around the world. But until next week, please remember, living in Missoula is a privilege, and with privilege comes responsibility. Please get informed, get engaged, and speak up on behalf of wildlife and wild places. And if you think you're too small to make a difference, then you've never spent the night with a mosquito.